Hello, and thank you for taking the time to take this course, this module on motivation interviewing and tobacco dependence treatment. The PI for this study is Professor Elizabeth Bukusi and Dr. Stella Billows. We'd like to acknowledge the partners who have made this study successful. First of all, we are acknowledging the partnership between Kisumu Ministry of Health, the Kenya Medical Research Institute, and the University of California, San Francisco. We'd also like to recognize NACADA and the Ministry of Health, the Tobacco Control Unit, because they are collaborators in this study. Funding for this study is provided by the U.S. National Cancer Institute. A significant portion of the content was adapted from the UCSF Treatment for Change and the San Francisco Health Network. We'll be exploring two counseling strategies. We have looked at practical counseling and motivational interviewing. Under practical counseling, we'll be looking at what works empirically, focusing on knowledge, information sharing, behavioral coping skills, and cognitive coping skills. On the other hand, motivational interviewing focuses on theories of how people change their behaviors, issues of interpersonal relationships, reducing resistance by eliciting clients' own words to commit to change. We look at the first one, practical counseling. Practical counseling is, let's say, the counseling that you've heard of, where it is traditionally used most of the time. It has been shown to help clients quit. You go to a psychologist, you go to a counselor, you sit and you go through your therapy sessions. There is relapse prevention. Follow-up is also done. It has been shown to result in higher abstinence rates. It is a common component of intensive tobacco interventions. It supports with problem solving, skills training. If you're having issues of communication, practical counseling is there. If you're having issues of anger management, practical counseling is also there. It has been shown to also work very well when it comes to stress management. We'll now look at the common elements of practical counseling. The first one and the key is to provide basic information. So first off, you want to offer support, you need to be able to understand how tobacco works. You need to understand the impact of tobacco use because you will need to share this information with the patient. They need to understand that even a single puff can increase the likelihood of a full relapse. They need to understand the withdrawal symptoms and how these typically peak within 1 to 2 weeks after quitting, but they also dissipate after a week or so. You need to also talk to the patients about recognizing danger situations. For example, negative moods will affect them. When they're angry, they might find they're feeling a craving to smoke. When they're stressed, they might feel the urge to smoke. Being around tobacco users is a trigger. Drinking alcohol is one of the danger situations. Having smoking cues like ashtrays around them is also another trigger. And of course, availability of tobacco products around them is a serious trigger. As part of practical counseling, you will need to support the patients to develop coping skills. Here they learn to anticipate and avoid temptations and trigger situations. They learn cognitive strategies that helps to reduce negative moods. They learn how to manage stress. They learn behavioral activities to cope with smoking urges and distraction techniques, things like relaxation techniques, things like imagery that support them to cope when they're having smoking urges. On the other hand, when you're looking at motivational interviewing, we have to highlight, first of all, it is not persuading or convincing your patients. With motivational interviewing, we are having a conversation. So we'll be using OZ. These are skills of motivation interviewing. We'll look at this in detail. So OZ is open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summarizing. We'll look at it again. We also use paths and rulers. We'll look at that also in detail. Motivational interviewing is believing in the patient's motivation, action plan, confidence, or strength. We'll look at this again in detail. And motivation interviewing is based on the belief that the patient knows what's best for themselves. And actually, when you ask the patient, they're able to elicit what they feel might work for them. Motivational interviewing is a new way of being with people. Traditionally, the practitioner knew, it was more centered on the practitioner. As a clinician, you'd find you're giving a lot of information without even finding out what the client knows. You're teaching, the patient has not told you what the issue is. You're manipulating them and telling them they will die of tobacco use. And when the patient stops using tobacco, the clinician feels like I have saved the patient. If the patient is not interested in what the clinician is saying, the clinician says, this patient is bad because resistance is seen as bad. On the other hand, motivational interviewing is patient-centered. The focus is engaging the patient, eliciting information from the patient, sharing information and exchanging with the patient, and learning from the patient. The patient might be experiencing something the clinician is not aware. In motivational interviewing, the patient saves his self because the patient knows what is best for themselves. And in MI, resistant is seen as information. So when you find a patient is resistant, then you are encouraged to probe more so that you understand if there's something you're missing. And this is because people tend to resist that which is forced upon them. People tend to support that which they have helped to create because they own it. On the skills of MI, we looked at OZ, and I told you we'd look at it again. So when you're talking about open-ended questions, you're saying these are questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no. For example, at what time do you smoke the most? Affirmations. Here we remind the patients of their strengths. You find out how long have you stayed without smoking? And the patient says, maybe 1 day, and you affirm them for that 1 day. You actually tell them that is very good, keep it up, and you've been able to make it for 1 day, you can do it for more days. Then reflections, you give back the patient information they've shared, emotions. As they're talking, they feel like you're journeying together. Summary, you summarize what the patient has shared with you while they were talking, so the patient feel heard. Rolling with resistance, you do not try to convince the patient that what they're saying is wrong. You actually listen to them and you try something else if what you're saying is not seeming to work. Then we have the paths and the rulers. Under the paths, You ask the patient, what if you made the change? What would happen? Then the client will be able to share that, yes, if I made this change, I would lose out on friends, or I'd be able to save some money, and then you affirm them. On the other hand, with rulers, you want to find out on a scale how they view themselves. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about your tobacco use? And then they'll ask you, what do you mean? You're like, okay, so maybe 1 being you really do not think it is a problem at all, and 10 being you know very well that this is a serious issue for you. Then they'll be able to pick on 1 and say, I think I'm at a 5. And you can follow up with, okay, so what makes you feel you're at a 5 and not a 4? And you realize you end up gathering more information. Then we have the math. We look at the 3 elements also in detail. So the first element is motivation. The second element is action plan. And the third element is confidence. So the first element under motivation, we are asking, how can we motivate our patients? And here we'll be looking at the different strategies. So under strategy 1, we'll be asking them permission before you share any relevant information. You'll ask the patient, may I share some information about smoking? The patients who don't want any information, they feel like they know. So they say, yeah, you go ahead. Then now you can bring in the impact of health. You'll bring in the impact of money, like a packet of cigarettes. Let's look at Sportsman, for example, goes for 10 shillings per stick, and we don't sell in sticks. So that is about 200 shillings per pack. You know what that can do for you? That can buy for you eggs. That can buy for you, even half a kg of sugar. So it can be able to help with the family. You bring in issues of mood. You bring in areas of relationships, because most of the time someone will have complained. I mean, the smoking causes bad breath, and therefore the family member or someone with a relationship with them will have mentioned it. And of course, the sense of control. You've seen when people are having withdrawals, they're having headaches, and they do not want to just sit with others. They have to go outside to look for that cigarette, and sometimes it can be very embarrassing. You might be asked, so what? Yes, you've given me this information. What do you want me to do? But before that, you as the clinician, you will ask the patient, so what do you make of this information? And some are brazen. They'll actually tell you, so what? Everyone is going to die anyway. And when that happens, it is not an issue. They are not in denial. They are trying to understand. And that is the time you need to be able to help them to understand, like, if you stop and you have extra time, what would you do with the extra time you might get from cancer or stroke? If they're old, then you talk about grandkids. If they're young, that means they can exercise without feeling like their lungs are burning up. When people fail to change, it's usually not because of an understanding problem. The second strategy is you're saying you need to share facts, then make them relatable. They might ask you, so what? Because they do not feel like any of that is making sense to them. So using the same element, you might be able to help them to understand that the coughing, for example, when they've come to you and they're coughing, you can highlight that. The coughing sounds exhausting. How would you use the extra energy you might get from quitting smoking? So you make it relevant to their current situation. And you do that with all of them, the money aspect, the relationships, the mood. You make the person feel like it is about them. When you're still continuing with the conversation, now the patient has been listening to you, you bring in the question, do you believe that you will quit smoking someday? If they say yes, you find out from them what would be your reason for quitting. Whichever reason they give you, affirm them and give them reflections so that they feel heard. If they answer no, highlight the impact of tobacco use. If after highlighting that they still say, yeah, no, I still don't think I'll be able to smoke, then you say, would you be interested in how smoking affects this area? Because maybe they don't know. Make it clear for them. The second aspect is the action plan. A client might be able to say, okay, you've told me all this, but I also know that I have issues. I get withdrawals. I have cravings. So if I stop, then what? You tell them, I have a plan. I can help you, for example, with your cravings. We have cessation medication. You can be put on a nicotine replacement therapy. We have the patches, we have the gums, we have the lozenges. You can be put on medication like bupropion. We have Zyban. We have your Wellbutrin. You can support them with distraction exercises, meditative exercises, grounding activities. You encourage them to avoid very high TV, avoid taking alcohol, avoid caffeine consumption because these have been shown that they can trigger cravings. Encourage them to call a quit line, 1192. If you know a web referral, refer them. Encourage them that they're trained counselors who will be there to support them. And most of the time, those trained counselors are able to call patients within 2 to 5 days of referral to them. When you want to move to the next step, then you now ask, have you ever gone at least one full day without smoking? Because we've talked about the action plan. Then they tell you yes. And of course, you affirm them. That is amazing. Usually the first 24 hours is the most difficult. Then you find out from them, what have you found helpful or challenging? And how can I help? If they say no, you find out, would you be interested in trying to quit for one day? Then they'll either tell you a yes or a no. When they tell you a yes, you find out again. Remember the ruler? On a scale from 0 to 10, how ready are you to make that quit attempt? Then how can I help you? If they still feel that they're not interested in making a quit attempt, you say, okay, no problem, but you help them to understand that you will be available when they're ready. Our third step is building confidence. In building confidence, we want to identify their strengths. We want to ensure they have something to stand on, and we want to reassure them that we are on the right track. So under strength, you'll have found out on a scale from 0 to 10, how confident are you in quitting? Then they'll tell you something, then you're like, aha. So which of your strengths contributed to this high score? And the patient will be able to identify something positive about themselves. And just that identification keeps the patient motivated. When you're giving them something to stand on, you try to have them think of a positive time, a time that they did something and they succeeded. Can you remember a time when you got good at something? Remember a time when you excelled? That makes it possible. They feel like, yes, I can do this. And that reassurance that we are on the right track, you tell them you quit smoking while you're admitted in the hospital. I bet you can use the same determination during the next quit attempt. So you keep encouraging them. You are on a journey. And just to be transparent, sometimes it might look difficult. You might experience some more coughing. You might feel like you're having chest pains and feel like you will not survive this. But let me just say that during the first week of quitting, because your lungs are coming back alive and removing the gunk from smoking, you might feel like this. Also, you might experience weight gain, and this is because food might start smelling and tasting better. You might find you have caved and maybe lapsed and smoked a cigarette, and this is because cravings might feel stronger at this time. These symptoms are very normal and they will pass. So hang in there and don't give up. I'm sure your motivation and your strength will help you be able to go through this. You have got this. Thank you very much. Feel free to come back and listen to this recording again and again. Asante sana.